Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We have a special guest in the building.
Yes, indeed.
He is my tax attorney, Eric Lee. Welcome, Eric.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Who is Eric Lee?
Well, before we start that, let me tell you how I met Eric. So I was having some tax issues and some tax problems. I think a lot of us sometimes we do, and that's because we come from places where we honestly don't know how the correct way to do taxes or how to set up our businesses, and I didn't. And I was lost and confused. I reached out to a couple of accountants and tax attorneys who guided me wrong, and I was stuck to the point where most people don't know, where the IRS actually put a lien on my passport.
No.
Yes, and I couldn't travel. I couldn't move, and I didn't know, and it was nothing I can do. It wasn't the fact that I owed the money. I was going back and forth with them, and they were doing things that I didn't think was right. And a friend of mine named Steph told me that he had a friend that had a friend, and I reached out to Eric, and Eric came and he worked my ish out. And the reason he's here today is because I know tax season is right around the corner, and there's so many people that need help with their taxes and just don't what to do or how to do it. So I was like, why don't you come up and try to break down a lot of the things that you do, that maybe you can help people like you actually helped me.
Break it down, Eric. I want to know how you saved Envy's ass.
Well, don't say how you saved my ass, but he definitely saved my ass.
Well, I mean, it's definitely been an interesting journey, Envy, right? And what we actually need to consider, especially for your listeners, right? The people who make $60,000, $100,000 or less. It's like the various deductions that came in last year under the Biden administration that most people forget about. Most people actually never even heard about these things, right? For example, many of your listeners, if they have children, all right, under the age of 17, they should be getting $300 a month last year, all right?
That's the child tax credit?
That's the child tax credit.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Manchin's in charge right now with the Senate, right? We probably don't have that right now. So it's $2,000 this year. But last year it was $3,000 for children under 6 to 17. Kids younger than 6, it was $3,600.
Now, what about if somebody has 6 kids? Up to how many kids?
Infinite amount.
Really?
Okay, but that's the nice credit. That's everything that everyone hears about, Charlamagne. All right, but Envy, the big one. This is the one that people don't know about. Okay, is the dependent care credit.
What's
the
that?
Dependent care credit is if you have children who you need to actually drop off at daycare or summer school, whatever. Some place that you need to have your kids at when you need to go to work, all right, that is $8,000 to $16,000. $16,000 for
Back
expenses.
on your tax returns?
2021.
Really?
2021, all right? And this is something that is so important for our listeners. $16,000. We always talk about how expensive childcare is, right? The Biden administration got something, right? They gave us $16,000 for each for the dependent care credit, right? Your listeners need to take advantage of that.
What qualifications do you need to get that $16,000 to make sure that our listeners are able to get it? So this is this year's tax return, which is due when? April
15th.
April 15th. So what are the qualifications to get that amount of money for that? And what is it called again?
Dependent care credit.
Dependent care credit, huh?
The dependent must be 13 years or younger, unless they cannot physically or mentally take care of themselves.
Okay.
All right. You also they have to live with you for 51% of the time. Now, this is also not just when we think about just kids. All right. If I'm taking care of my parents and they fall within the same criteria, it's also $8,000 to $16,000 dependent. All right. So it's also a misnomer when we think it's only for children. All right. So it's a valuable item, right? Your listeners just probably got $16,000.
So wait a minute. So if I have a kid, and it's per kid?
No, up to 2.
Up to 2.
Yeah, the first one is 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever is 16.
And then also, so I know a lot of our listeners, a lot of people out there, they have their mothers living with them or their fathers living with them, and they're taking care of their mother and father, so they can get that under the Dependent Act as well.
Yes, if they actually have a facility that also help with them as well.
Now, a lot of people always ask, they work a 9 to 5 and they get taxes taken out of their check. What write-offs can they do if they already working a 9 to 5, they already take taxes out? how can they get more money back or write more things off if possible? What do they need to set up? Do they need to set up a corporation, an S corp, a LLC? How do they write off their gas? How do they do that to get more money back?
Well, I hate to be a lawyer with you guys, but it kind of depends, right? It kind of depends, because I don't want anyone to be just setting up a corporation just to get a tax deduction, because that doesn't make any sense. You're throwing away thousands and thousands of dollars to get a tax deduction of maybe 37%. That doesn't make any sense. All right. What does make sense is actually going through your sources of income and finding out what your income is, right? If it's just W-2 wages, all right, then we may need to actually set up a retirement account, like an IRA or 401k, go to Morgan Stanley, go to Merrill Lynch, whatever, and set one up, right? It doesn't take you very long. Okay. If it's interest income, we need to determine, do you actually need the income, or can you actually transform that income? All right. Maybe you want to change it into a municipal bond, right? Some of our older listeners, who are retirees, they may have like a bunch of savings income, interest income, right? So then they should change it into something that's non-taxable. All right. Capital gains. Maybe you don't sell your stock, or maybe you transform it into a, what is called a dividend reinvestment plan. All right. So if you're getting, for example, dividends from Microsoft, $3 a year or whatever it is, right? You can change it where you don't get that $3, you actually get stock in Microsoft. And that is not taxable. So it really does depend on the client and the situation.
Now, for
what are the top 5 things you can't write off? Because I think that's
that's a great question. Yeah. Okay, some clients will say like, "Hey, I have all these clothes. I have this chain. Right? Can I write this off?" Right? The rule is ordinary and necessary business expense. All right. First of all, it has to be a business expense. Second of all, you have to have income. If you don't have income, you don't have to have
into the mic.
Right? If you don't have income, you don't have expenses. So when people say like, all right, can I buy a car and just write this off, Charlamagne, right? Well, first of all, is it necessary and is it ordinary? All right. What type of business do you have? If I buy a Rolls Royce, right, that's probably not necessary. But in some situations, it may be, right? So it goes down this path of like what is necessary. Yeah.
Now, what other things? He said 5 things. What other things do people always try to write off that they can't write off? You said jewelry, you see clothes.
It depends.
Cars.
So dinners is an interesting thing. Dinner, you bring up dinners, right? And this is where it's kind of unfair, right? You take your kids out to dinner, right? You go to Chuck E. Cheese or whatever. That's not tax deductible, right? That's not tax deductible. You shouldn't write that off. But let's just say this. There are many small family businesses, right? And they're all employees of yours, right? Legitimate employees of yours, right? You go to Chuck E. Cheese and you actually have you actually have a business operation. You bring Eric along. We do a corporate reorg at Chuck E. Cheese, right? That's deductible. So there are these rules where, when you say like, what are the 5 that you can't? It really depends. Because even a chain sometimes, most people, it's just a chain, right? But if it's truly, truly a legitimate like marketing device, that may work. Okay. That may work. All right. 99% of the time it won't, but it may. There's case law where if you buy a Van Gogh, it's not going to work, right?
You can't write off a Van Gogh?
No, right?
Wow.
But if you have an art gallery or a law firm or something that particularly caters to, collectors or whatever, you theoretically could.
Right.
Right. So it really does depend.
Wow.
I was going to ask you, when it comes to like a lot of people go online and they go to these huge chains of people doing their taxes. What are your thoughts on that? It's almost like and I don't want to disrespect anybody who does, but I feel like it's like the fast food of accounting sometimes.
So, that's really funny. And my local station has one of these chains, and they were talking about like drop off and go. Drop off and go. So give me your bag of receipts and documents and go, right? That's the worst idea, all right? Chains can be perfectly fine. There are great people who work at these chains, all right? But to find a good CPA, to find a good attorney, right? It's not about dropping off and go. You got to find somebody who actually needs to listen to your story. You think about it. Your average listener, how much time do they put working a day, right?
8 to 10 hours, I'm sure.
10,
Yeah.
Probably more nowadays,
Yeah.
10 to 12.
Right. And then, multiply that over a year, right? They have a story to tell. It's not drop off and go. It's not a garbage bag of receipts, right? A proper CPA or attorney going through tax returns, you need to actually tell your story, right? You need to actually say, hey, I actually bought this car, right? Is it a true deduction? Hey, I have dry cleaning. Would that be a tax deduction, right? Some of these are simple answers. Dry cleaning, probably not, right? Gucci wallet, no, right? But you still have a story to tell. You have to tell your story. And then you got to make sure that the preparer actually goes and walks through the lines with you.
Right.
Right.
How did the tax code hurt low and middle class families?
All right. There are two examples. I want to give you two examples, right? First example is, let's look at interest, right? My parents don't have much money, right? They open an account at Citibank. They put in $1,000. They get some interest income, right? That is taxed at ordinary income, up to 37%. Okay, up to 37% federally. Let's not even talk about the state. Okay, 37%. If they get dividends, they go on Robinhood, open up an account, right? Dividend income is taxed at most 23.8%. So you have a swing of 14%. All right. Who has dividends in America? The wealthy.
The rich, yeah.
Right. Who has interest income? More likely retirees, more likely poor people, who need to open up just something like a savings account. Why would the code change that? Because there's really no difference between interest income and dividend income, if you think about it. It's easier to open a Robinhood account than it is to open a savings account in Bank of America, right? So that's one thing. Look at the meals that we're talking about. Charlamagne, when you take your kids out, right? Not tax deductible. But if you have a business, why? Why would that be tax deductible? So these are like very, very simple things. But then there are policy things to your question, right? In the 50s and 60s, there were significant tax credits and deductions for setting up multifamily households. Okay.
Wow.
Now those are done. Now the tax credits and deductions are for setting up these McMansions, right? So our shift in housing has gone into larger homes away from the multifamily homes that we need in places like New York. All right. So you see this throughout the code. All right. And this is no slam against the IRS. This is no slam against the IRS. 73,000 people work at the IRS. They're actually pretty overworked. There are 16,000 people who work at the phone banks in the IRS. And when you call the IRS, Charlamagne, you're always on hold. You're on hold for hours. Envy, you're talking about your passport thing? That was hours of just being on hold. Hours on being on hold, right? 16,000. Do you know how many calls they get a year? 240 million calls.
Is it true the IRS was created to help the people, and then it changed where it's like more of a government thing now?
Yeah. I mean, when we think about like what taxes were for, right? It was for education. It was for health and maintenance of society, right? But now it's just become an organ, and it's become kind of like a political entity and almost kind of like a kicking back. Like people just like kick it now, and it's become this like organization that has to just interpret this behemoth. The Internal Revenue Code is probably 9 times the size of the King James Bible.
Damn.
9 times.
Who the hell can read all that?
Nobody can. Nobody can.
So you don't even know what's in there.
No. Like, I mean, if you're asking me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I know my corporations, right? I know my transfers, corporate reorgs. I know tax planning, right? But if you ask me like, hey, estate planning. Hey, my mom has, so many millions.
Yeah.
I don't know that section. I don't know that section that well, right? I have to rely on my partner, Christina Peraza, who knows how to reduce people's income, for estate planning. So anyone who says they know every part of the tax code, there's no possible way.
Is there a way not to pay taxes? Like, I know at one time
That's in the tax code. We got to read it. It's a chapter.
Is there any way not to pay taxes? I don't know. Maybe if you were Native American, you don't have to pay. Is there any truth to any of that?
No.
The Native Americans got to pay taxes.
No, I mean you got to pay where your income is sourced. All right. So even people who say like, hey, move to Nevada, move to Florida, move to Texas, move to Puerto Rico, right? I have a client who, knock on wood, is going to be a Bitcoin billionaire.
Right.
All right. And everybody in the Bitcoin industry is like, oh, just move to Puerto Rico so then you can avoid all your taxes.
I've heard that before.
Right? No, or make sure your server's in Israel or something like that, to avoid your taxes. Absolutely not, right? You have to pay your fair share, all right, of where the income is sourced, all right? But where those people actually minimize or lower their taxes is to implement certain vehicles to get them from 37%, where we were talking about for like interest income, down to 23.8 in dividends. Kind of like how Mitt Romney did it, with hedge fund money, right? So that's how people reduce their taxes.
And I'm not gonna lie though, if we did live in like a Florida or New York, man, that would save us so much money because New York state taxes be kicking ass.
100%. So
that's about how much they take.
You got you got 10.9% state, and then if you live in the city, it's what 3.876, right? California 13.3, New Jersey's 10.75, right? So yeah, you have to go to Texas. You got to go to Florida, right?
Yeah.
Some people say that. Some retirees will say like, hey, how do I avoid all my state income tax? Well, you have to move to Florida. But the thing is, you actually have to move to Florida. You actually have to live there for like 183 days, right? And that may not be as easy as you think, Yeah.
I was going to ask, there's a lot of people buying houses right now during the pandemic. Interest rates are low. It seems like people are giving money. How can you make sure that, well, first of all, after you buy a house, can you write off anything in the house at the end of the year? And also, is there any way to get any type of tax returns for buying that house? Because you buy a house, now you got to pay taxes at the end of the year, you're broke. So is there anything that you can do to write any of that stuff off?
Yeah. So your property taxes will be part of your itemized deductions. That's a tax deduction. Okay. Your mortgage interest is a tax deduction. All right. So those are the two key ones. All right. Now, let's talk about your house, right? Are you using it for a business purpose, right?
If I have an office.
Yeah, home office deduction, all right? If you have a business, right, maybe you, instead of taking a home office deduction, you should have some shareholder meetings in there, right? And that could reduce some of your business income. And then it would also then serve as a deduction for you, depending on how the business is formed.
Gotcha.
Now, tell me if this is true. They say gains from the sale of stock is taxed at most 23.8%, but if you work fast food, you may have to pay more?
Yeah, 100%.
Huh?
100%. Because, for example, let's just talk about New York, right? Like, your listener lives in New York, right? 3.876, right? Plus 10.9, right? So that's 13%, right? Federal rate, right? For a fast food worker, we'll just say 10%, right? Including that in all your state income, that's already more than that 23.8 that you're talking about on
Jesus.
on stocks.
Jesus.
Yeah. So again, you're talking about like how it's unfair, right? And many athletes who come in here, right? Many entertainers who come in here, they probably pay a higher rate than the team owners.
Makes no sense.
No sense at all.
Well, that means the team owners, accountants have read the other parts of the tax code. That's what that means.
I was going to ask this too. So a lot of us have, parents, grandparents that are old, getting old, and possibly pass away, right?
Yeah.
So they usually leave money to the kids and grandkids, right? Is there any way not to get taxed twice, right? Because let's think your grandmother works, right? Let's say your grandmother has $100,000 saving, or let's say $25,000. She paid taxes on that money already.
Yeah.
So now when she gives it to you, you got to pay taxes on that $25,000 again?
Well, this is something that we actually need to educate. We need to do better in messaging as well as education.
But if I leave something to my kids, they got to pay taxes off something I already paid taxes on?
Possibly.
That's crazy.
It depends on the situation.
Okay.
So we always hear about the death tax. All right. That is actually perfect marketing. Death tax is implicated for individuals who have a net asset value of $12.06 million or more. all right? And if you're married, that doubles. 12.06 million, all right? So when we're talking about like the death tax and how, oh my gosh, when I pass away, we're going to be taxed a second time, right? First of all, do you have 12.06? And if you're married, do you have 25 million,
yeah.
right? Probably not. But if you do, for those listeners who are fortunate enough to do that, right, you would have experienced individuals, again, like my partner, Christina, who would probably be able to reduce that, move into life insurance, move into properties, whatever, okay? So when we talk about the death tax, it's only for a very, very small section. Now, but, okay, let's just say they changed the laws. Let's just say Biden changes the laws, all right? How do you get around that? All right. First of all, get an estate planning attorney, right? Make sure you have a will and a trust. Okay. The will is just nice, but the trust makes sure you avoid probate. And probate can be very, very expensive. For some states, like in Florida, they actually set a 4% on your net asset value. Wow. Okay. So make sure you get a trust. Okay. Then regarding your asset amount, right? During your life, in order to avoid those taxes, if Biden, for example, changes the laws, right? Start gifting that, okay? For fortunate listeners, right, you can gift up to $16,000 to an infinite amount of people. Give it to Envy, give it to Charlamagne, give it to Eric, give it to E. $16,000, right? They're married, it's $32,000 per donee. So you can reduce your net asset value so then you're not subject to those taxes.
Gotcha.
Wow. How do student loans affect people's taxes?
So, great question. It depends. If you make less than $70,000, make sure you speak with your tax preparer because you get a $2,500 tax deduction. Mm-hmm. If you make more than $70,000, up to around $80,000, it does phase out, meaning it reduces.
What about people who just bought a new home? How did they get a higher return?
Again, it would depend on home mortgage interest as well as property taxes. And then some of the things that we were talking about, if you have a business, then maybe you need to utilize your house within the business.
When it comes to the administration, the presidential administration, what helps people more when it comes to money as far as saving? Is it the Democrats or the Republicans? Because you hear a lot of businessmen saying, I want Trump because Trump does better for business owners. And then you hear other people say, no, Biden is going to help the people that need it more. So what are your thoughts on as far as helping people and writing things off and for small business owners and regular people?
So I live in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we always hear about the corruption in Illinois and how bad potholes are, the school system and everything. Mm-hmm. Okay. At the end of the year, my husband and I were very fortunate. We're very fortunate. We live a blessed life. I mean, I'm in the Breakfast Club. Are you kidding me? Right? And we always try to make deductions at the end of the year, charitable deductions to reduce our taxes, right? But there's something I do where I look up the zip code where we live. We live in Oak Park. And we look for what the schools actually need. So teachers actually put up these projects. They ask for donations, right? Every year, invariably, we get teachers who ask us for juice boxes, crayons, toilet paper. Mm-hmm. We have teachers who are asking us for toilet paper. What country do we live in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And when we hear about wasting taxes, when we talk about that, okay, hold that aside. I have students who don't have toilet paper. Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. Right? But in wealthier neighborhoods in Chicago, they're literally giving out iPads to their kids.
That's true.
All right. So when you're talking about who's better, Republicans or Democrats, I have to be agnostic about that. All right. But what I need to know is the listeners need to make sure that they call in, that they are actually educated, that they actually make sure that the senators and congresspeople are actually making sure that there is that dependent care credit for this year.
No, that's so real what you said because it doesn't matter who's in office. It's like the poor always suffer.
Yeah, or even if there are provisions, Charlamagne, they need to know that it's there, right? Like, I mean, you guys have this amazing platform, right? But I'm sure there are plenty of listeners who did not know about the dependent care credit or even the child tax credit, to be fair, right? So when we're saying the poor always suffers, 100%. But when they even get something, they may not know it's available.
That's real.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to bring you on is because, we always talk about, I always say servicing our life, right? We'll take our car to get an oil change. We'll take our car to get tires. We'll take, there's so many different things, but we have to make sure that as a person we're taken care of, right? And whether it's going to the doctor, whether it's having a will, whether it's having an accountant, an attorney, things that that we need. And now I call you all the time. I don't care if I'm buying a car, a piece of jewelry, a T-shirt. If I'm taking a trip, I call them because I want to know the best way to write it off or the best way to pay for it. And you're always there to help me. So I just wanted to say thank you. And hopefully, you gave some insight to people out there of why they need a good accountant. And sometimes that fast food accountant services might not be beneficial to you, and it might be actually hurting you. So I just want you guys to take a look into that and make sure you have a great tax attorney that can look into your stuff and help you on your journey, because a lot of us have journeys, and he's part of this journey with me. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Word.
Now, people want to get in touch with you. I know you're not really taking clients, but I know if they want it, maybe they have a question or whatever it may be. How can they get in contact with you or your firm?
Yeah, go to our website at playersmanagementgroup.com. Players, PLAYERS, MGMT Group, GROUP.com.
Now, with business, what do you suggest for people that have a company? LLC, S Corp. What's best? What's better? Why they should use each one? Because a lot of people don't know the difference between an LLC and an S Corp and what they should use it for.
100%, or even C Corps, right? And that really depends, because each one of there are primarily 6 entities out there, right? You could be a sole proprietorship. I just, do an Uber thing, right? I can be a little bit more sophisticated, form an LLC. I could form an S corporation. I could form a C corporation. Charlamagne and I can open up a coffee store, right? That becomes a general partnership by default, right? Each one of these have their own benefits, okay? But each one of them have their own weaknesses, all right? A good attorney or a good CPA would probably tell you to actually have them all if possible, because there are certain provisions within the S corporation, certain benefits that do not apply to the C corporation, okay? So for example, if I'm an employee at an S corporation, certain benefits that I have as a shareholder employee, I can't take it. But if I'm an employee of the C corporation, I can take those deductions, okay? For example, health insurance, right? The company can actually deduct that. If I'm an employee of a C corporation, if I'm an employee of an S corporation, I can't deduct that. Okay, so you may need a comprehensive plan where you actually set all those things up in place.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Eric Lee, I appreciate you for joining us.
Very informative, brother.
Eric was trying to get us to get paid for our business, but it didn't work. It didn't happen.
Whose business? What business?
Where the iHeart pays directly to the business.
Oh, got you.
I was trying to help you before you met me.
All right. Well, it's Eric Lee. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.